Got my copy of your book.
Good. It was so helpful that you put the page numbers by the poems too, because I'm always having this experience where in a situation like this, where I'm trying to find the poems and that somebody asks about, and I can't get to, I've got Post-its, but I can't get to the right Post-it, you know.
I find sometimes the Post-its are even like they get in the way.
I know it's a dense force of multicolored Post-its, according to actually no organizations.
Hello, everybody. Peter Maravellis here, hoping this finds you all safe and well. On behalf of City Lights Booksellers and Publishers and the City Lights Foundation, I'd like to welcome you to City Lights Live, our virtual online reading series. As always, we are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral grounds of the Ramaytush peoples, also known as the San Francisco Bay Area, from where we continue to celebrate the works of authors we know and love with readings, discussions, and forums. Tonight, we are greatly honored to have joining us two of this country's great poetic treasures. I am speaking of Rae Armantrout and Lyn Hejinian. For anyone with a love of poetry, their work needs little introduction. We are thrilled to be celebrating a new poetry collection by Rae Armantrout. It is called Finalists, and it is published by the fine folks at Wesleyan University Press. Finalists contains Ms. Armantrout's two most recent projects available together in one book, including the long-form poem Threat Landscape. Rae Armantrout is the Pulitzer Prize winning author of 15 books of poetry. She's published 10 books with Wesleyan University Press. These include Wobble, Entanglements, Partly, and Versed. She's received numerous honors for her work, including a 2009 National Book Critics Circle Award. She makes her home in Everett, Washington. So joining Ms. Armantrout tonight is the poet, essayist, translator, and publisher, Lyn Hejinian. She is no stranger to City Lights, as we have had the honor of hosting her many times in the past. She is often associated with the language poets and is known for her landmark work, My Life, as well as her book of essays, The Language of Inquiry. Well, it is a delight to have Ms. Hejinian back with us in our orbit, especially in this really wonderful double bill. So before we begin, I'd like to remind you, we're going to be posting links in the chat function of your Zoom dashboard with which you may purchase copies of Finalists, but also many other books by both our readers. So we're going to be hosting also a Q&A towards the end of the talk. If you have any questions, comments, praise, please post them in that chat function. So join us now in giving a very warm welcome to Rae Armantrout and Lyn Hejinian. Welcome to City Lights Live.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for having us.
And thank you, Rae, for inviting me to participate in this launch of Finalists, which, as you know, I have read extremely carefully in preparation for having a conversation with you after your reading. But for now, I get to just mute myself and sit back and enjoy your reading. So go for it. Okay.
First, I want to say that Lyn sent me some proposed questions, and they were really interesting ones that made me think about some of the work in a different way even. And I'm going to read mainly the poems that she drew my attention to. So it'll be a kind of, not entirely, but almost entirely Lyn Hejinian choice from Finalists. Hang on. Domestic as an empty shopping cart parked on a ledge above a freeway. Artifactual as an acorn barnacle. What is the purpose of barnacles? People ask the internet. Barnacles are filter feeders. They're fish tank decor. A plaque of barnacles on top of a toilet. This cluster of brittle puckers clinging to its old idea. These craters stripe pale lavender for some unlikely eye. System processing. In the new view, a system is conscious when the information within it is both differentiated into parts and integrated as a whole. At the estate sale, every room is filled with a different kind of doll. Barbies, babies, Raggedy Anns, side by side, on beds, chairs, counters. Contrails, sun on power lines, slant rhyme, member with membrane, number with numb. To get an idea is to place one thing beside another, see how they look, whether they're a good fit. Though I know I don't want, oh, I read that wrong, whether they're a good fit, though I don't want them to fuse, I know I will want to move them again. See, I practiced this twice and I still blew it. Startle reflex. Ford's robo-dogs roam the factory floor and enjoy a good belly rub. People are startled to discover that their inner monologues are ghost written. A sentence that once made sense and now does not appears haunted. Experts are surprised to learn sparrows across North America have changed their tune. Let's just make it to the end. Everyone's riveted by the shock of the disaster victims, the way they search for words. Ready. It is always possible. There are several forms it is more or less likely to take at any point, but it won't, except by chance. I need you to locate this, get at it, where it almost is, almost isn't, floating in near vacuum. Feel it out until ping is its pronoun. I am ready to be displaced. The news. We wanted to tell someone everything, or everyone something. How large and limp the leaves were in the half sun. But what is half sun, finally? We'd been relaxing protections in our sleep again, it seemed. Now we were fewer. Some imagined St. Peter as a special concierge or a supercomputer listening. Did he listen to what he must already know, hearing only ones and zeros, pluses and minuses? Was that at least something? Over and over, first one tall stalk and then its twin dips westward and recovers. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Incognito mode. This morning stillness with its occasional ripples, shivers, shrugs, seemingly unprovoked. If matter is tufted energy, then energy is what? I ask because if I know anything, it's that each thing is something else. In reality, our world is made up of particles with names like the seven dwarfs: strange, up, down, charm, muon, gluon, and tau. Particles are freaks of measurement. In reality, nothing is waving. Aloha, hello, goodbye. Names like the seven deadly sins. On the horizon are large planes dawdling. Lions. Lion taming exists to make us think that the ferocity of lions is fake. Or lion taming exists to parody our sense of human mastery over the earth. Of course, any thought is a shot in the dark, but a poem exists to contain it. Now a thought is a watched pot. Playfellow. It was like dreaming. I thought I was carrying animals to a castle in a backhoe, but really I was shoving plastic down a chute, no, a hall. Speech is role-playing before it is thought. We talk as if to others, then to others, and then finally to ourselves. But really, I was speaking to a room full of strangers in words I could almost make out. And this is a prose poem based on a scientific article I read with a kind of weird, not really mainstream theory of what dark matter is. Starts out with a sort of physics anecdote too. Floating. Once there was a woman who told a famous physicist that the universe rested on turtlebacks all the way down. A perfect anecdote. I don't think it occurred to him that she might be putting him on. I mean no disrespect when I say that there's a physicist who claims the universe we see is made of shrunken universes, small primordial black holes. That's what the mysterious dark matter is. Naturally, we're in one of these cosmic pinheads because, seen from the outside, our universe might look like a black hole. I don't mind. Actually, I like the idea. In each of these blind spots, huge stars are burning, though no one outside can see them. So the mysterious dark matter is full of obscure light. On melancholy. What I thought of as a pleasant lingering on things, tender, without the flurried rush of hope, Freud called melancholia, a state in which a person grieves for a loss she is unable to identify. What I experienced as a general attunement, wishing only to continue, a suspended attitude, Freud described as narcissistic identification with the object that becomes a substitute for the erotic cathexis. And what if, in my case, there are multiple objects? Whatever appears outside this window, the dangling threads of the weeping cypress, how I would love to make the elegant dismissive gestures of those long fingers. Think back. Say an idea is math without numbers. For instance, you could say that an idea distorts consciousness as a massive object distorts space. Such distortion is sometimes known as attraction. It pulls a debris field into orbit or a halo of microplastics. You slip from one thought to the next as a snake sloughs off old skin. Thinking back is less reliable than you might think. Second life. I collect words to fill empty space. I think a lot of their enduring appeal is how real it is. Many people believe charismatic objects are spirits. They think such spirits can enliven us. I like to collect smooth, multicolored rocks, so distinct from the dirt or mud they rest on, carry them a while, then set them down, like this. I dreamed I was captioning the last dream I had, or the one that was playing simultaneously elsewhere in my head. Streaming. This is a poem I don't often read, but here goes. Streaming. The ring of the pickaxes. Let me start that again. The ring of the pickaxes of people searching for the bones of their dead relatives plays in an art museum in Mexico City on repeat. It's very real for them, isn't it? Says PBS anchor Jeffrey Brown, dreamily leaning in. Then geese cycle madly across a pond like Wile E. Coyote 3 feet past the cliff, catch lift and join the great migration. You can too, they seem to suggest. Time's arrow is pointed elsewhere. Not even Looney Tunes is forever. But if drug gangs, the mechanics of flight, and Wile E. Coyote occur in my mind's eye in rapid succession, I need to believe there's some reason, or else things fall apart. Ant trails and cobwebs from one thought to the next, strings of Christmas lights. The door for Robert and Jess. Again, the endless, brief cascade of white wisteria against that wall, as if all along there's been a sweet marriage taking place. I work at thought curation. I don't pretend this is a cure. I merely hint that there's a secret door connecting those two rooms. For our purposes, it doesn't matter whether this is true. The mysteries. When seen from a certain angle, she is mysterious and dark. You love that about her. Angle or distance? Or you've got her number. She's a nihilist, an exhibitionist, a tad precious, pointlessly fastidious, hermetic, cold. People are obvious until you love them. Then they're black boxes, deep sixed flight recorders, or presents that won't open. This is why the word why so often sounds like an accusation. And lastly, split. There are pockets of apocalypse, invaginations. Don't wince. Oh, motors are loud around here. I'm going to start that one from the beginning. That was a motorcycle going by. Split. There are pockets of apocalypse, invaginations. Don't wince. I know you've always appreciated correspondence, the dormant stage of contagion. Some say truth is a form of parasitism. It is what it is. Distal and proximal halves split down the mid-rib of a leaf. Okay, that's it for my part.
You know, I've heard so many readings of yours, and they're always so amazing. And this is a question that I didn't tell you I was going to ask because I only just thought of it. But is it weird for you to be reading on Zoom compared to in live spaces? I mean, you seem so present, but it must be hard.
Yeah, it's the illusion of presence, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I do kind of miss a live audience where you can get a sense of how they're reacting, what they like, I mean, that's fun. When you get a positive response back from the audience, which doesn't always happen, but when it does happen, that's fun. And you can't tell on Zoom, but you just have to kind of fake it. Yeah.
So I wanted to begin by asking like a big question about the structure of the book. On the back cover, it says a double book by Pulitzer Prize winning poet Rae Armantrout. And Peter talked about it being 2 books in one cover. Why 2 books? Well, how do you think about this double construction? And maybe this actually, come to think of it, is a kind of thematic question, because there's like refractions, simultaneities, not quite doublings, but mirrorings, or throughout the work.
That's a good question. And the answer, I'm afraid the answer to the construction of the book question is a little boring because it's pragmatic. And that is that I had Threat Landscape done. And then I had, at the same time, I had maybe 2/3 of the one called Finalists done. And so I submitted Threat Landscape to Wesleyan, and I warned her that I had all this other work. And she said, well, why don't, Susanna Tamminen at Wesleyan said, why don't you combine them? Because otherwise, we're going to bring Threat Landscape out in 2 years and Finalists out in 4 years. And by that time, I won't even remember what I was thinking about or have any connection to the poems. So I thought, that's a good idea. But I think it's a good idea, not just because of, how I'm going to feel about it, but also because, these poems were all written in a certain time frame. Finalists, the second half was written during the pandemic, and the first part, Threat Landscape, basically wasn't. Although I pulled one poem called Fashion into Threat Landscape that's got something to do with the pandemic. I can't remember why, but basically the second part was written during the pandemic and the first part was written before. But still, they were written during mostly during the Trump presidency, totally during the effects of climate disaster and collapse. And that comes into some of the poems in both sections. That's one thing that I meant by the title Finalists. The title Threat Landscape is obvious, but the title Finalists is, what I was thinking of is kind of that we are the final people. You and I might not be the final generation, but the final generation is alive who are going to live on an earth that's easily habitable, I'm afraid. So that's what I meant by finalists. There's also maybe, a couple times I've had books that were finalists for a prize, so maybe there's a little dig in there somewhere, but mostly I was thinking about extinction, other species and our own. And because of that, I don't think that problem's going to go away, but I think that there's something about the character of this last maybe 3 years in which I wrote this book that's, a piece of time.
Yeah, I remember being at a big round table. I think it was in Los Angeles with a group of poets, and something about tradition, history, the future. And then you just said, none of us will be alive in 30 years.
I said that again recently in a podcast. A rabbi I didn't know asked me to be in a podcast, and he asked me that same question in terms of, what poets alive now will we remember in 50 years? And I said, I think we're going to be, burning all the paper for heat in 50 years. I don't think he really wanted to hear it. I think he was kind of freaked out, and he still hasn't released the podcast. So we'll see if he does.
But in a funny way, although it's not what I was intending, but I want to talk about the first poem in the book and the last poem in the book. But as you're saying, we're all going to be gone. In 50 years, we'll be burning all the paper of books just to try and stay warm and to cook the last little bit of scavenged rabbit, whatever. But I want to say, hang on.
Yeah, hang on. That is the first poem in the book.
Yeah.
In the book. And of course I don't want, even though I say this so almost glibly, well, maybe glibly, it's like whistling past the graveyard, I guess, but I do have the twin 5-year-old granddaughter. So I really don't want this to be true. I don't want it to be true in any case, but hang on, which is the one that starts, domestic as an empty shopping cart parked on a ledge above a freeway, artifactual as an acorn barnacle. And that's, those are the part about the acorn barnacle is the beginning of a second half of, or not half, but a second part of the poem. The poem's in 2 parts. And the first 4 lines are the entire first part, which I just read, the bit about the shopping cart, domestic as an empty shopping cart, parked on a ledge above a freeway. And I saw that, and when I was driving down a street, and I thought, well, who left that there and why? And then I thought about how you often see homeless people camped on those hillside embankments, above freeways, or in this case, it would be below a freeway, and how homeless people often carry all, their stuff in shopping carts, and how you probably couldn't take a shopping cart down the hill to the encampment, and how that might be how that shopping cart was left there, looking so isolated and strange. And that's just what went through my mind. And so, the shopping cart is kind of hanging on to the edge, but also people are hanging on to the edge of whatever domesticity they can manage. And then, so the two parts start in the same way. You were talking about parallels or parallelism. You mentioned that. Well, so this is a kind of parallel in the structure: domestic as an empty shopping cart, artifactual as an acorn barnacle. But, obviously it's very different for to be a barnacle or to be a person, if that's really about people.
I did notice that both an empty shopping cart and an acorn barnacle are 7 syllables long. But there is an actual rhythmic parallel there.
Oh, good. I didn't even know that, although I can sort of feel it when I read it, but I hadn't actually counted. So
yeah,
that's excellent.
And I thought, the empty shopping cart as an image of the domestic was very sad.
Yeah.
That it's empty.
Yeah.
Now, in your anecdote of your speculation as to why it was there and who took it there, etc., it's empty because it was full, and then the person or persons pushing or pulling it managed to get all the stuff out and leave it behind. But it's not a domestic image, really.
No.
A shopping cart, like domesticity, is, yeah, it's full carts and indoors and all of that. Yeah.
Right, and the shopping cart is displaced anyway, and the acorn barnacles are displaced if they're in your house and their decor. Oddly, the barnacles are housed, and the people, if that's who left the cart there, are not housed. But I think I loved. Well, you haven't asked the question yet, but I'll ask it of myself. You sent me a question, or just a kind of reference to the way that I set up parallels. And then I think you also said contrasts and syllogisms. And I thought that was such an interesting thing to think about, because I am I'm like a California girl. I'm obsessed with setting up kind of skewed parallels, and that are a little off balance, and they're very off balance in this case. For one thing, the first section is 4 lines, and the next section is a page, like a full page, and a little more. But so they're juxtapositions of parallels that also are embedded with contrasts, I guess, sort of flawed parallels. I don't know about the syllogisms. I mean, I was going to ask you where you thought a syllogism was.
The juxtapositions that are so characteristic of your work, and when you read, you don't indicate where the breaks between units are, but they're very vivid on the page. And so you compose via juxtaposition, and inevitably a responsive reader wants to make sense of the combination of the two things. Why did attention to X combine with attention to Y to become a work of art? And so what is the relationship between the two? And the sort of logical model in Western tradition is the syllogism. You have A, then you have B, so you come to C, and you almost always leave C out. That's my job, others' job, or your job, when you're being asked annoying questions about your work.
I love this. I love this question, and I enjoy logic, and I also enjoy flawed logic, or writing about flawed logic that's just goes wrong, and sometimes goes horribly or comically wrong. I'm not sure that it does that. Well, it sort of does that in this case. I mean, the barnacles, acorn barnacles, which are pretty, by the end, they're in a bathroom on a toilet.
Do you know that there is such a thing as toilet barnacles, which is shit?
Oh no, I didn't. I was unaware of that. Oh no, that's not what I meant. Had not heard that one. Did you know, of course you didn't, that we actually have acorn barnacles on the back of our toilet, and they're very pretty. And that's why I was writing about them, is that I was looking at them and going, well, that's interesting looking, and oh well. Yeah.
Yeah, well, forget that. All of you who are here, just
try to put that out of your mind. Just try. This is what it's like when two friends are doing a Q&A. Shall we move on?
So that's yes. Delete. Okay, so Hang On's the first poem, and then the last poem that you read, which is the last poem in the book, is Split, which I mean, the title clearly indicates that it's germane to this conversation. But I also have like a question about it, but maybe you wouldn't mind reading it again, just so people remember.
Right, short. Split. There are pockets of apocalypse, invaginations. Don't wince. I know you've always appreciated correspondence, the dormant stage of contagion. Some say truth is a form of parasitism. It is what it is. Distal and proximal have split down the mid-rib of a leaf.
So, I mean, my just initial question is prompted by your description of a distal and proximal of the leaf that split down the mid-rib, which is a really precise botanical situating of a relationship between parts of a leaf, and I mean, how much of your work comes out of your engagements with what, for lack of a better word, I'll call the natural world?
Yeah, I like that. That's a good question too, because what is the natural world these days? But not all of it, certainly. Well, it depends on where you draw the boundary to nature, but some of it comes from reading about science or about nature. I mean, I assume that I got those words, and I do not remember, but I assume that I got those very precise and strange words from reading something botanical. So that language must have been picked up and incorporated. So some of it comes from reading, some of it just comes from looking out my window and appreciating what I see, or taking a walk and thinking about what I see in terms of, natural things, plant forms. But really, anything in the world around me can come in as data, and not all of it would be classified as nature, I suppose,
What about your interest in physics, which is hard to see out the window?
Yeah, that of course comes from reading. I started getting interested in physics in about 1981 when I read this very popular book called The Tao of Physics, which almost everyone was reading, and it was a big bestseller. And it's probably not a very good book on the subject, but that's how I got into it. I really didn't know anything about quantum mechanics before that. I think most people of our generation don't, unless they were physics majors, because it just wasn't it wasn't taught. I think it is taught more commonly now, but I didn't know anything about it. So the names of the particles, the subatomic particles, were pretty new to me. I mean, everyone has heard of electrons, but you know, the rest of the particle zoo, as they call it, was not known to me. And so first I just dived into the language. And the next thing was Ron Silliman asked me to do a collaboration with him, and we did engines. And I don't know, you probably don't remember, but that's the first time that I used physics in a poem. I was pulling in particle names and also pulling in the names of angels, sort of obscure angels, and you know, mixing them up like they were two sort of invented proxies. I mean, I don't mean to imply that there are no particles, but but I was using it sort of that way at that moment. And then I just continued reading books about science. And I've read I don't want to make a huge list, but I've read the Brian Greene books and the Carlo Rovelli books and Brian Cox books and Frank Wilczek, if I'm saying his name right. And I've just kept reading in that field, mainly because it just, boggles the mind. And whenever I'm puzzled and my mind is boggled, that makes me want to write. That's just often the starting point of a poem is, I want to understand that more. I want to understand what I read. I want to understand what I felt. I want to understand what I just saw. Maybe it's a shopping cart on the edge of a ledge over a freeway. So what's that about? But there's some little moment of head spinning that often begins my poems. And then I just kind of write into that. And when it's about physics, I think that I tend to deliberately absurdly combine what I've read about physics with what I know about or see in the everyday world and just try to overlap the one on the other. And of course they don't overlap very well. And so it becomes, comic and awkward, as in the beginning of In Reality, which I could, if I can find it, I could read again. Let me see. I think that's, you've got that here. So you've got it on, yes, 79. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I'll read that. And what I mean about bringing the sort of ordinary world, including pop culture, up against physics is in the first stanza here. In reality, our world is made of particles with names like the seven dwarfs: strange, up, down, charm, muon, gluon, and tau. So, it's a little bit outrageous maybe to sort of bump, I'm not exactly comparing, but to kind of bump the seven dwarfs up against the basic subatomic particles.
Well, you get the seven deadly sins in there too.
Yeah, I get that in there too.
You're not holding back.
And the seventh son is there somewhere. No, not really.
Yeah. So it's I'm thinking about your interest in particle physics or quantum physics, and the stuff of the world. And I've been reading, as I think you know, like fairly rigorously, the pre-Socratic philosophers for like 3 years with some classicists from UC Berkeley. So I'm not winging it on my own, which is a good thing. And as I understand it, the ancient Greeks, so like 500 BCE, had no concept of an immaterial world. Everything was what we would call matter, but it's often all the translations tend to use the word stuff.
Yeah. Huh.
Like these, elegant classics professors will talk about the cosmic stuff. It's really great.
Yeah.
And so, for example, when someone in Homer has a huge emotion, it blows out of their chest as stuff.
Oh,
It's yeah, it's hard for us to imagine because we've become so enamored of the immaterial.
starting with Plato,
Anyway.
I guess, huh?
Okay, so and it seemed to me that in some ways you are dealing with the cosmos of stuff that and ancient Greek philosophy, like in like the cosmos, right? The whole universe. But for Homer, like a chariot is a cosmos. It's a unit that works. It's an arrangement. An army is a cosmos. Also, the bow and arrow of a soldier is a cosmos. So there's all.
I mean, okay, so what is the Greek definition of cosmos? Is it like a whole that works, or?
It's an arrangement that works. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Which brings me my next question, which is the arrangements that your poems are. That, like, as you describe your interest, like your interest in particle physics, in botanical life, social life, socioeconomic happenstance, and then all the climate stuff that's obsessing you. All of this is our cosmoi. And then your poems too, I would propose to you, are cosmoi, that they are arrangements of stuff. Does that?
Yeah.
Can that?
That's I think that's flattering. Yeah. I mean, there is this material that, you know, comes from all these various sources, and I try to get it into some kind of shape and some kind of, as you say, cosmos, and so that the parts are interacting, even if they're interacting awkwardly, or they're just sparking, or they're pulling against each other, they have to be interacting somehow. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So now you read In Reality with the names of the particles. Just quick question: are those really the names of particles? Like, are there particles?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I didn't make that up. That strange, up and down, and charm are kinds of quarks. A gluon is a force-carrying particle, and you know, I'm really no expert. It may be that a muon and a tau are also force-carrying particles, but it may be that they are something else. But there are all subatomic particles.
So what about the large dawdling plane?
Oh,
Yeah,
what about that?
That's like a stunning moment. Like,
Yeah.
we've got these, like I have in my imagination, these like moving, circulating particles, dancing particles. And then there's this dawdling aeroplane, which is like way bigger than a particle, but it's actually only a particle. Like my thing about cosmoi, like different scales of cosmoi, it is actually, yeah, it's a particle.
It's a different, particulate instance in this poem for sure. I think I looked up at that point in reading this and saw a plane low on the horizon that didn't seem to be moving much. You know how that illusion works, and I just put it in the poem. And, you know, that's what I meant about just pulling in what seems like random material. And, you know, sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. I feel like it works here. I'm not sure exactly why. It's that maybe the contrast of the big and the small, the slow and the fast. But, you know, dawdling, and, you know, there are various ways you could read it. Dawdling is not exactly, well, dawdling's close to sloth, which is one of the 7 deadly sins. And then another thing that I thought when I saw this plane, which was quite low because it was going into SeaTac, but what, was low over the city. So what it reminded me of the planes, looking at the planes right before they hit the Twin Towers too. So there's that. But, I don't expect other people to necessarily see what I see.
Somehow that seems like a segue to the next question that I wanted, or next area, which is to talk about the poem Ready that you read.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And my question, it's on page 36.
Okay, good.
Because I have my questions right here in front of me. Yes, so my question is about the it, but could you read the poem again?
Yeah. Ready. It is always possible. There are several forms it is more or less likely to take at any point, but it won't, except by chance. I need you to locate this, get at it, where it almost is, almost isn't, floating in near vacuum. Feel it out until ping is its pronoun. I am ready to be displaced.
So almost always in your poems, the thing, the object, the situation is named. There is not here. It really struck me when I was reading the book. And then when I came back to it, it was still struck me. Do you want to say anything about it?
Well, I enjoy it. And one thing that I enjoy about it, and I don't know why I haven't done it more, but actually I have done it more. The last poem, and I think this is because of you, the last poem I wrote, which I just finished yesterday, I use an it. It's not quite like this, but it's also sort of unspecified. So you made me do that. But anyway, I knew what I had in mind at the time I wrote it, but that was quite a while ago. So when I look at it now, I remember what some of the things I was thinking were, but I also can see different things in it. So I think I deliberately kept it as indefinite, and yet there is this almost command to get at it, literally get at it. Locate this, get at it, where it almost is, almost isn't. By the way, speaking of particle physics, the where it almost is, almost isn't, floating in near vacuum describes subatomic particles because, and fun fact, in case you don't know, they really, according to physicists, don't have an actual location in space. They're more like a smear of probability and possibility until they're observed or until they interact with a larger concrete object. So, they are energy of some sort that is of a kind in an almost immaterial state until they interact with something else. And so that's what I was thinking there. So in other words, one referent is particles, but that you can't read the whole thing that way, or you probably wouldn't want to anyway. Now, when I start to read it from the top, it feels like maybe the it refers to the future because of because there are several forms. It is more or less likely to take at any point, but it won't except by chance. So there it feels like, the next configuration of events. And then in the middle, I need you to locate this, get at it. It almost seems like it refers to the meaning of it. I need you to understand this. Like what you're saying is like, you figure this out. What is this it? Another thing I was thinking at the time, I will say, though, it's kind of embarrassing, is I was thinking about the sometimes elusive nature of female sexual pleasure. Let's put that, oh no, someone's at the door. So, put that in and try it that way. What did you
That did
think?
not occur to me.
No, but yeah, I wouldn't have expected. Well, how did you read it? What did you think of it?
Well, I began thinking about the title "Ready," which suggested to me attentiveness,
Mhm.
a ready, a receptivity, like what's going to happen? I'm ready. Resignation, like okay, bring it on.
Mhm. Yeah.
I can't change it. It's going to happen. Curiosity,
Mhm. Yeah.
like I'm ready to find out. Let's go check it out. And then because of poems that follow it, it seemed to me to be talking ultimately about mortality, and that it could be read as death.
Yeah, it kind of goes there. I mean, I see that, and I saw it at the time too. The last two stanzas sort of wrote themselves, and feel it out until ping is its pronoun. It was fun to say. I hope no one's offended. So once ping is its pronoun, then the I turns into ping, I guess, and the ping is like, I don't know, the sound of in a video game, or a shooting gallery, or a pinball machine, when something hits something else.
It could also be the moment when someone gets it.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
That's right. You've aced it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's in terms of the particles, it's when the particles strike something and is measured, in the machine.
Yeah. All right. So how much time do we have?
Oh, well, it's almost 7, but we haven't gotten very far. Let's see, what else were we going to talk
Okay.
about?
Well, there's the whole question of the topical poem.
Yeah.
Statement.
Okay.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah. I gave a presentation at AWP, and Lyn was on the same panel. Year before last, it was a virtual thing. And actually, I organized the panel because Wesleyan asked me to. And so I chose the topic, which is, something like, what do you write about? And I posed that question because we all get asked that question so often. I mean, if you're on an airplane, your seatmate is likely to say, well, what do you do?
Ray, can I read the opening paragraph?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
All right, because I have it here.
Okay.
Okay, this is Ray starting her paper. We are all familiar with it. The person beside you on a plane who leans in and asks, what do you do? Perhaps they first ask if you're traveling for business or pleasure. If you're a poet, you've probably been dreading this. The P word makes most people uncomfortable, and you know it. Will you take the easy way out? Say you're on a vacation again? But what if it's a stylist at your hair salon? Or worse yet, a stranger you've been left to talk to at a party? My first move is to say I'm a writer, not a poet. But this, of course, leads directly to, oh, what do you write about? A natural enough question. And for some writers, not that hard to answer. For me, it's always been torture. Should I just say it? I write about ephemeral states of mind occasioned by shifting phenomena. Or maybe the answer is whatever intrigues me at the moment. Oh dear, that could sound slightly flirtatious. Quick, add something more. What about, I write about the tricks our language habits play on our thinking. All the above are true. I write about the world as it intersects with my mind. That's the real answer. It's not what they want to hear. End quote. Is it the real answer?
Oh, I guess I could go on making lists, but yeah, that's pretty much the real answer. Why do you doubt it?
Oh, I mean, just because, I thought it was a beautiful statement. and it doesn't explain the poems, but I think it could inspire other poets, or anyone that thinks as they live from day to day, minute to minute in the ongoing world. Not only to have thoughts in connection to the ephemeral passing things that happen, but actually to think about those thoughts, like to engage with the fact that they're thinking beings. So yeah, I don't think I have a real question. I guess I would speculate that your poems are engagements, like are what you say. I write about the tricks our language habits play on our thinking. I write about whatever intrigues me at the moment. I write about the ephemeral states of mind occasioned by shifting phenomena. That's my favorite one. Yeah. But then in Finalists, there are a number of poems that seem to speak to to exactly this, like what you said at the AWP conference. Yeah, and I don't know if you want to like talk about them, but like in the door, which is on page 139.
Yeah, could do
Like
that.
not on page 139. Okay, I gotta find it.
Oh, maybe I can, let's see.
Okay, table of contents. This
Oh,
book is
maybe I,
beautifully designed, by the way. It's on 159.
okay,
Sorry.
that's fine.
Okay,
Not,
there's
not really your responsibility.
okay at the beginning of the second section, 2 lines. There's a I work at thought line break curation, and I think that line break's important. I work at thought curation, and then you make a move that's quite clearly a move, but really lovely. I don't pretend this is a cure. So there's the problem of thought, the act of curation, like assembling the thoughts, and then like that it still doesn't cure anything, which of course, like a lot of this book is about writing, about.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much until you made that list. You said Ars Poetica, and then you listed about 6 poems that have a kind
1,
of
2,
statement.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah.
Yeah, that have a kind of statement about putting things together. I work at thought curation. I mean, I feel like I do. That is what I do. In terms of calling that work, I'm putting the work in scare quotes a little bit. And the word curation sounds a little pompous to me, but I was playing with that a bit. I was putting on a little bit of a voice, like I sometimes do, and pretending I was a pompous gallery owner or something. I work at thought curation.
That didn't strike me. I hear what you're saying about it could sound pompous, but you are taking what you're doing seriously.
Yeah.
And like I think there are pompous, like dreadful gallerists. We've all who've gone to a gallery have encountered one or another of such over the years, but a lot of them are really doing serious work, like editors, in the literary world. So I didn't see that as pompous. I saw that as like, I actually take this seriously.
Well, I mean, I do too, but sometimes I try to split the difference and just, I take things seriously and not, or in a heavy way and a light way at the same time. But I think it gets more serious as it goes on. I don't pretend this is a cure. I mean, cure is of course a play off the sound of curation naturally, but also true. I mean, you can fix thoughts up and put them in a way so that they interact with each other, and it could make you happy, but it's not really going to change anything. I merely hint that there's a secret door connecting those two rooms. I mean, in a way that goes back to the first section, which mentioned marriage. And in that case, gay marriage, based on that it's dedicated to Robert and Jess. So that sort of suggests maybe back in those days anyway, you know, a little bit of secrecy. I guess not in their case, but I merely hint there's a secret door connecting those two rooms. But I'm thinking really of the stanzas or sections in the poem. For our purposes, it doesn't matter whether this is true. So, you know, sometimes there is the appearance of a connection between two parts of my poem. And I suppose if you really logically parsed it with true syllogisms, there might not, the connection might not hold up, but it's sort of, maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, but it's kind of like a mirage that appears there for a while, maybe.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I have one last question, and then we should give some time for Q&As if you have energy for them, because Peter asked about that. In incognito mode, you don't need to read it. I mean, you can. I love you to read it again. But you say, if I know anything, it's that each thing is something else. And that sparked memories of your early-ish in the ongoing days of language writing, where you identified yourself as a lyric poet. And you did that at a time when a group of us were writing a essay, I guess, a collectively written essay about I'll just dare say the corrupt status of the lyric ego in American, well, in lyric poetry, more generally, romanticism. And thinking about that, like, I guess my question to you is, what do you think about lyric subjectivity in your writing? But what I'll say is that I see very little of it there.
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, people have called me a lyric poet, and people have called me a language poet, but I don't remember. Maybe I did, but I don't remember asserting that I was a lyric poet. But I think maybe someone said that about me to distinguish, to sort of separate me from the rest. But I mean, it depends on, you know, how you define lyric. I mean, some people think that a lyric is a short song-like poem. Some of my poems are that, you know. If a lyric is a love poem where one person professes her feelings for another, I seldom do that. So I mean, I don't even know what lyric means anymore, really.
Yeah, no, I was more thinking about the subjectivity issue. I mean, another poet I would consider now in my loose definition of lyric poetry, and I'm actually not interested in genre things at all.
Not either.
But is Larry Eigner, who so rarely, if ever, uses the pronoun I or even we. It's basically data, but it's interpreted data, meticulously registered data, and implicitly interpreted data. And I think that you do that also. We know nothing about your private life. Now, I know that your granddaughters, Sasha and Renee, appear in this book, but no one who's not a close friend of yours would know that it's Sasha and Renee.
I think it's clear sometimes that there are children. But
Chuck appears by name
he does in a dream sequence.
right
And I-
after Second Life. I mean, dreams enter a lot in this
Yeah.
book.
Well, I think of dreams. I mean, they always say it's bad taste to tell your dreams, but I think of dreams as just more data. It's, it's something that you didn't will. It's outside the will. I think what I'm suspicious of is things that come from my conscious will, and I want to find something outside that, like, something I didn't plan on, something like, like a sight that I could not have anticipated out of the real world, or a dream image is the same. Even though it comes from me, it's something I didn't plan or control or anticipate. And I like to bring in that kind of data to the poem from anywhere I can get it. And I've forgotten what the original question was now.
That's okay. We've been talking for a long time, and the eponymous Chuck just walked by in the background.
Yes. Yeah, he's sitting there listening now.
So, shall we?
So yeah, we do have some questions that are coming
Okay.
through. Rick asks, I was thinking that a plane in flight can, quote, dawdle, unquote, from the point of view of an observer. Can you talk about your role of observing, in quotes, in your poems?
Well, I think that's what Lyn was getting to in that last question too, is, instead of foregrounding the pronoun I, instead foregrounding kind of the EYE I of, what do I see, and bringing that in. And that plane is a good example of what I was just talking about, because I imagined that I just looked up and from writing and saw the plane, and I didn't know it would be there. So it was, something that presented itself. And I always like to incorporate things that present themselves and just see how I can, whether I can incorporate them. I mean, sometimes I can't, right? Not everything comes satisfactorily into the poem, but when something does, that's what I really enjoy. And I think, looking at things is my hobby.
I have another question from JW. In relation to the unreliability of energy, speech, and thinking, they were wondering if you could say a little about, this is in quotes, distortion, sometimes known as attraction, unquote, and how unreliability informs this.
Yeah, so that's in Think Back. Lyn, what page? What page is Think Back on?
Okay. Hang tight. I'll look.
Okay. Okay, I got it. It's on 130. Okay, so I think it's good to read the stanza above it and the stanza below it for context. So, for instance, you could say that an idea distorts consciousness as a massive object distorts space. So I'm not saying that that's actually true, but it's a kind of comparison. It's a kind of parallel that one could make about gravity, that a massive, that's Einstein's idea of gravity, that it's actually the distortion of space by a massive object, and that an idea, for the moment at least, is a massive object that distorts the field around it. We've seen ideas do that. I think we could come up with a couple or two examples. Such distortion is sometimes known as attraction. Well, I think I still feel like that's true, but I'm thinking of specifically here of gravity. So I want to stay within the metaphor that I've laid out. And then it pulls a debris field into orbit, a halo of microplastics. Well, I mean, gravity does pull a debris field into orbit, for instance. That's what the planets were formed from. The halo of microplastics, of course, is our own doing. So I'm, and maybe that's where the distortion comes in, you know, the idea that creates a distortion in, or just human thinking creating a distortion in the world that ends up with a halo of microplastics orbiting, which I think is probably true by now, as all of those satellites break apart and all of their components, some made of plastic, are, you know, turning into lovely microplastics in a halo around Earth. Just a charming thought. I don't know if that answers your question, but I did the best I could to bring distortion into that. I think that, yeah, you're suggesting that, I guess, if nothing's reliable, then how do I navigate the world or the poem? That's probably what you're thinking. I'm guessing what you're thinking, but I mean, don't we have to? Sometimes people, you know, force something to be the center and something to be reliable, you know, like the MAGA people, you know, Donald Trump is reliable, or, I mean, that's a gross example, or Putin, he's reliable, he's so strong, what a strong leader. But I'm just suspicious of that, whether it's a person or an abstract idea. I'm suspicious of putting something in the center and making everything else orbit around it. Bothers me.
Rob asks, is it, in quotes, inherently more interesting than I, in quotes?
Oh God. Well, it turns into I and ready after ping is my pronoun. I am ready to be displaced. So right at the end, it turns into I and then gets displaced. I don't want to have to choose between the pronouns because for me, they're all, one is a mask for another. I is another, but to say a cliche. So I don't know, but I am assuming that most human minds work in the same way and have similar perceptions. So I'm assuming that I is a pronoun that could be another, could be she, could be we. I don't know about it.
Lyn, did you have any last thoughts or reflections before we wrap up?
Nothing oracular to say. You know, maybe something practical is like everyone just keep buying books. It may be that life is coming to an end, but we should love it while it's here. And like,
And also you can burn the pages later or memorize them, memorize my whole book and tell it to your children.
or to the cockroaches.
Yeah, right. They'll love it.
Oh, this has
Peter.
been such a pleasure, and we are ever grateful to you both for joining us tonight, and all of you in the audience. It's been great watching all the comments roll. Really such a receptive audience. So we hope you'll be safe, you'll be well, and we hope to see you all again soon sometime. Rae, I'll give you the last word.
Oh, this was such fun, although some of the questions were hard from Lyn and from the audience, I'll admit, but it was a lot of fun talking with you, Lyn, and just doing this. So thank you for inviting us.
Yes, thank you, Peter. And thank you, Rae.
Thank you. Good night.